just to add to that, you can, when we record, you feel free to go off video, obviously, and you can create a pseudonym for your name. I don't know if we talked about that earlier, but if you'd rather not your real name to kind of show up in any context.
So
and you change that under your image, you do the ... and you can change your name.
Thanks for that reminder, Tim. Can you add it to the chat also?
Also, we're gonna post the, well, I don't know if you want to mention, Lee, we're gonna post the video after.
Yeah, so for anyone who's wondering, we're also going to post the video recording after the class. So that'll be available. And I think folks will get an email, so. All right, so let me share screen. Okay, so are folks seeing our studio?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Thank you.
Yes.
And apologies, I'm looking like to the side because my camera is only on one side of one screen that I'm using. So this is the file right here, the R Markdown file that you downloaded from the GitHub link. We're not going to use that immediately because first, for the first part of class, we're going to go through an intro to R Markdown. So we talked about this a little bit in our first two classes, and we're going to talk about basically what is Markdown and how to use it in RStudio. So let's go ahead and open a fresh file. So your RStudio should look something like this. It has 4 panes. This is where the current document you're using is. Can everyone see my cursor?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, and I'll make it a little bit bigger if it's too small. Okay, so in RStudio you should have 4 panes, and this is in the upper left-hand corner. You'll be able to see the document that you're currently editing. Under that are a few tabs like the console, terminal, R Markdown, and so this the one you'll probably use the most is the console when you're running code, because it'll show like what you're running and then process it in this upper left-hand or bottom left-hand corner, and then in the top right is some data that's being saved when you're running your code, and in the bottom right-hand corner is libraries and help and things like that. So to open a new Markdown file, let's go to File, New File, and then open our Markdown. So you'll get a prompt that that asks you to open a new file. You can give it a title. For example, we can call it intro-r Markdown. And then under the author, it'll assign your name to it. So R Markdown is a specific type of file that you can save that you can publish in different formats. So for example, you can see here that in the first option is HTML, and we're going to select that one because we want our file to output into an HTML file. So click OK, and you'll see here that it by default gives you this section here, kind of like a header that describes your file. And really quick, something that I'm going to try doing today is showing you what we're going to do first, or rather what we want to achieve, and then how we're going to do it. So let me show, I'm going to quickly share a different screen. And I'm going to share this one. So does everyone see this screen? That you should be able to see intro to R Markdown, and it looks like a pretty printed page, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yay, thank you. As long as somebody says it, you know, like somebody's listening. Okay.
Another last thing for the students in the room or the learners in the room, whenever like these yes or no questions are asked, it's really helpful for us if you chime in with like a yes or a no, or I don't get it, into the chat. That'll help us kind of keep track of who's actually seeing what we're sharing and so on.
Yeah, thanks, Ibrahim. Yeah, I really appreciate that too. It's kind of like, even as I was preparing for this, I was thinking about the interactions that we usually have in class. And I like to just ask questions out to the audience. And I usually like to, or I hear things back. And so maybe we can experiment with ways that we can interact with each other, even though we're on video.
So just one thing, if the answer is yes, like, yeah, that's great, you can use the reactions down with the smiley face on the bottom of your Zoom and do kind of up, you know, hands up thing. So unfortunately, they don't have a thumbs down if something's not, you know, right. But that's probably an easy way to express, hey, things are good. And if things aren't good, you can put it in the chat.
Yeah. Yeah, so also, yeah, definitely feel free to use the chat because the helpers will be monitoring that and they'll be able to respond more quickly. Okay, yeah, so thanks you guys. So back to our markdown file that I wanted to show you. So this is an example of a markdown file that's like published in HTML. So this is exactly what we're gonna try to make right now. So let's go back to our studio. I'm gonna jump back to that screen. All right, and everybody sees our studio again? Okay, so this is the beginning of our markdown file. And by default, it kind of gives you an example of the header and then a code chunk. So here, like this is a good review for the past couple weeks, where when we're in our studio, when we create what our studio calls a chunk of code, it's, oops. I don't know what just happened. Oh, I guess I collapsed that code chunk. But so a code chunk you can create by enclosing code within these 3 tick marks. So for example, it looks like this: 3 tick marks in your upper left-hand corner, curly braces R, and then you close it with tick marks again. So you can see here that that chunk of code that you can write is grayed out. So you actually don't need this right now, but I wanted to show you what that was. So I'm going to remove this, but I want to start talking about what Markdown is. So it's nice here that RStudio gives you a little intro to what Markdown is. It's basically a markup language where that has specific formatting and syntax, and you can publish it in a very clean way in HTML, like you saw just a moment ago, in a PDF, a Word document. And this is really helpful if you're planning to, say, write code and you need to create some figures and you're writing a publication with it too. It makes it really easy for you to be able to publish your findings in a clean way. And that's exactly what we're going to go over today. Let's see. So if you scroll down, we can go to the bottom of where it says including plots, and let's just go down below that. So in Markdown, there are certain tools that you could use to create headers and edit your text. So let me share this screen. Sorry for jumping around so much. I just want to make sure folks can see what where we're headed, pretty much. So in your in your R Markdown file, you can type things like headers. So throughout this lesson, I'd like for us to do this all together. So while I'm typing, I'd like you to try it too. So let's try typing in some headers in your R Markdown file. And let's see. So below the part that says including plots, you can start typing there. So here, where I highlighted, I know it's a little small or grayed out, but if you type in the pound or hashtag sign, that's a header. And in Markdown, the headers go from 1 to 6, 1 being the largest and 6 being the smallest. You might have noticed this in the Etherpad or in HTML that you can add headers to the Etherpad as well. I think that's new too. It used to just be like the same text size, but now you can add headers. So go ahead and try to add this code into your R Markdown file and see what comes out. So I'm going to start here by adding, do folks see RStudio right now?
I see an arm, yeah, oh, now I see RStudio.
Now you do. Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's say we type, let's make a header with header 1. So when you use $1 $, it's going to be header 1, which is the largest. So I want to title that's called headers. And then underneath, I want to type in, this is an H1 tag. It's also, so headers, I mean, when we say the word tag, we're also, it's kind of a reference to HTML because that's what HTML calls headers, or they use these things called tags to format the text. Oh, whoops. And then I'm going to add an H3 header. And I'm adding backticks here, right here right before the actual like caret, because that'll actually show, it kind of highlights it as code when you publish it in the HTML document later. Okay, so far we have a little bit of Markdown in this file, and so if you click on the existing code here, you could see what a published Markdown chunk looks like. So here I'm going to go to the default code chunk here, and then if you press run, it'll run some code and it shows you some data. In the example that we looked at, we looked at from plots previously. If you click that, it shows you how you can add a plot to Markdown too. So this is just some easy examples of how to add figures and text. So sorry if it's really noisy. All right, so from there, hey Tim, I wanted to ask you, I remember when you covered this previously, you ran everything at the end. Maybe, would you recommend running everything at the end?
Your R Markdown?
Yeah, like publishing it. Because in the meantime, we're just going to be typing in the markdown?
I knit it iteratively. So it's, I
Mhm.
knit it all the time. I mean, you can do it.
Okay, yeah, I don't mind doing that either. For now, I think I'm gonna pull out this R Markdown file out of my R Studio because I realized that the screen you're seeing is probably really small. Is that right? Would that help if I did that? Okay, can folks see this untitled R Markdown file? Can I get a thumbs up or some kind of?
I still see your 4 panels, Lee. Should we be seeing a different?
Yeah, I want to show just, let's see, how about now?
Yeah, now. Yeah.
Okay, all right, so now that we've typed in this chunk of headers, if you go to the like upper left-hand corner and you see that button that says knit, and there's like a little yarn ball and some needles. Oops. If you go to the right-hand side and click knit to HTML, you can now save this as an HTML document. So you can call it R Markdown example. And save it in your current directory. So you'll see down here in the console, or you'll see in your console in RStudio that it's running. And then from there, it'll automatically open in HTML. So let me share that one. Are folks able to see that when you publish that and knit it? Okay, which screen are people seeing? Can you see the HTML document?
Yeah, I see the HTML document. How did you convert it from Markdown into HTML? Can you repeat that step, please?
Oh yeah, thank you, Scott. Okay, yeah, that's a very important question. So the way that our Markdown is converted into HTML, it uses something called pandoc, and I want to say, I feel like I might need Tim to talk about that.
Pandoc is great. It can convert Markdown into PDFs, LaTeX, HTML, and other formats. But it's a more complicated process, but it's a way to convert documents into other formats.
Right, and so it actually is, from what I recall, it's an open source software that is used very often in text documents and different types of text documents. So if you go, I don't have the website up right now, but I could add it to our notes later. But pandoc is pretty cool because it converts so many different types of documents, like PDFs to like text documents to HTML. But that's what our studio is using to convert Markdown to HTML. I see a lot of questions in the chat, but I'm going to assume like the helpers are taking a look, or maybe we can pause if there are a lot of questions.
So the only repeated thing is that some people's tags aren't showing up properly. Could be a couple of reasons. Maybe the tags are written into the code chunk, so they're not showing up at all. I don't know if there's other reasons why that could happen. There seems like it was resolved. Yeah, they've been resolved now.
Okay.
Thanks, folks.
Yeah.
Oh.
So if you're
Tim?
also, Tim?
I just wanted to add that that we'll go more into Pandoc and these different output formats, because that's the big idea. You can write this one document, you can output it to Word, you can output it to HTML, you can output it to PDF, you can output it to slides. So all these different, like Scott was saying, different, that's enabled by this tool called Pandoc, which is really like a helper tool underneath, you know, doing all this stuff. But we'll cover that next week more. So come back. That's my plug for next week.
Yeah, we're going to jump into more detail next week. But so the goal for this morning is to just get an R Markdown file working, to be able to add and edit some text and to add some code to it, so that we're going to use this R Markdown file for the rest of our class when we jump into ggplot. And in next Friday's class, we're going to go into even more detail about publishing documents. So let's go back to our R Markdown file. I'm glad everyone's, thanks for the feedback. I'm glad everyone's doing okay. And let's edit some more text. Let's say, so keep in mind that even though I said this is an H3 tag, you could also say one. I'm going to add an H4 and just say this is, or my name is, and you can add your name. So let's go down and edit some text. So there are other ways that you can edit our Markdown. And let's say that we want to, I lost my screen. Let's say that we want to add some style to our text. So for example, it's really easy to create text that's bold, for example. You could type in, my name is Lee. And then if you add 2 stars on the outside of those, they'll publish bold. And you could type, make something italic too. So you could type in, I like Fridays, and add an underscore in the front and behind it too. And that makes it italicized. And then you could also merge those 2 things. So you could type, my favorite day is Friday. And if you made it bold, you could also italicize it. So it could be bold italic too. So from there, you can knit it again. Just save it as this file that you have right now. And it should open up the same way it did before. And then at the bottom, you should see the big header that says text. And then my name is your name, I like Fridays. And then the second one should be bold italic. Cool. And then, so like we mentioned before, you can add code chunks to your R Markdown file. And remember that there's a shortcut. We covered this, I think, like last week and the week before that. There's a shortcut to add a code chunk. And on Windows, it should be Control-Alt-I. And in Mac, it's Command-Alt-I. So if you hit that, it'll just really quickly add a code chunk for you to fill in for later. Yeah, so in the file that you downloaded, there's some notes and guidelines on R Markdown, or R Markdown in general. So you could refer to those later, but this is just a quick way for you to get started with an R Markdown file. And let's see. You can also add figures too, but we'll go over that later. How's everybody doing so far? Any questions? I also need to check our schedule. All good. Thank you for the feedback. All right, so yeah, now that we have our markdown file and we know how to add code, we're gonna start jumping into ggplot today. So we might have mentioned this. Yeah, so we have gone over ggplot a little bit, and it's an R library or package, same thing. Library and package are used interchangeably a lot, but ggplot is used for data visualization. So ggplot, the library is actually called ggplot2. And sorry, I'm gonna jump back. There's nothing on my screen, I'm not typing right now, FYI. So ggplot2 is also available in Python. So if you code in Python, you might have seen this, or if you might have heard of it. And it's based on the concept of the grammar of graphics. And I've included a little image of that on our notes too. So the grammar of graphics is this concept that you can create any chart using the same combination of layers of data. I'm gonna go back to my examples. Well, I'll just show it here. So if folks have ever used anything like Photoshop or GIS or other types of graphical software, then you might be familiar with these concepts, but you might have used it in a user interface instead of in code. So this is exciting to see it and look at it in a different way. All right, let me try to open this one so it's easier to see. Okay, so in my RStudio here, I have this one open. So you should be able to see this graphic right here. It might look a little bit small, but basically, so it says ggplot2 is based on the grammar of graphics, the idea that you can build every graphic from the same components, a data set, a coordinate system, and geoms or geometry. And they are visual marks that represent the data. So for example, scatter plot would be a type of geom. And ggplot2 is, what I'm guessing and finally realized is that it probably stands for grammar of graphics, because I'd heard of ggplot and used it for years, and I thought, why is it called ggplot? Software people just make up random names. And so Christian's laughing, so I'm wondering if you had that, if you realized that too.
That's just a common question. Also, the other one is what happened to 1? There's ggplot2.
Yeah.
Where's the original?
Did you ever find out?
It's deprecated. Yeah. There was a 1, or not. It wasn't 1. It was ggplot, and then Hadley Wickham, who created the ggplot. I don't know. There's a story behind it, and you can find it. But yeah, there was a 1. They got deprecated.
Good to know.
Wow, resolving all the questions.
Joey's laughing too, because I guess she had that same question. I'm trying to find my, so you guys are seeing RStudio, right? I just want to make sure. Okay. Yep. All right, cool. So now that we kind of went over that, let's jump in and start using RStudio. So, I mean, sorry, ggplot. So let's get started in here. Actually, I'm going to go back to my example. Please, I appreciate you for bearing with me because there's so many screens to try to figure out which one's the right one too. Okay, so we're going to go back to our markdown file, and like I mentioned before, we know how to add code now. So let's get started and add ggplot to the library. And feel free to add comments and notes throughout our Markdown file, because that's like the beauty of our Markdown and dynamic documents like this, because you can add your notes and headers and your code as well. So you can look back and it'll be organized and hopefully make sense to you. So let's get started and add ggplot2. So in R, recall that we add libraries by entering library and then.
So Lee, we still see your, we don't see you typing.
Oh, sorry.
I think you're sharing the other window.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. Okay, I'm getting this thing that says screen sharing is paused. Resume share.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
all right. Awesome. All right. Thanks, you guys. Okay. So here I'm still in the R Markdown file with headers and the things that we typed earlier, and I added a code chunk using that Command Alt I, and just added a title here. And I'm typing in library parentheses ggplot2. And we also want to add the Gapminder library so that we can access the data that we used last week. So we'll type in library Gapminder and enter. And you can also run that code chunk here. And if you're looking at your RStudio with all the panels, you'll see that it ran in your console. So under there, we can also view the Gapminder data by typing in, I'm going to add under here, view parentheses Gapminder. So by now, I also want to pause for a little bit to show the little ways throughout our lesson that you can find help in RStudio. So RStudio is pretty smart because once you start typing something in, it knows what you want to look at. And then it gives you this little yellow window with a description of what that is. And down here it says press F1 for additional help too. So if ever you are curious or you get lost, feel free to explore. So if you type that in, you should be able to view. And so in RStudio, once you run this command, view Gapminder, it'll open Gapminder in another window, and it'll open the data. And you should be able to see, let me try to share this one now, just so we're on the same page. Okay, you guys can see RStudio and the Gapminder data?
yes.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so when we entered view Gapminder, we're able to open up Gapminder, the data itself, and see all the variables over here. And you can scroll down. I mean, it's pretty long, but you at least get a summary, an overview of what's going on. And then hopefully you guys were able to run that. I did run into an issue before with that, so let us know. Okay, so from there, we're able to see all the variables. And then we can see that we have country, continent, year, life expectancy, which is like life EXP, pop for population, and GDP per capita. And it's important to look at this before we start coding, because we can reference that in our code. Like we will be able to graph these exact variables in our data. So for example, let's say we want to see a chart that graphs life expectancy and GDP per capita. So we can start to, I'm gonna open up this code. So if we wanted to graph two of those, then our graph would look something like this. Can everybody see this?
Yep.
Cool. So our graph would look something like this. What I like to do when we're going through like plotting lessons is to just kind of take a second to look at the chart and describe what it is. What do we see here? I know it's like a very simple thought exercise, but, and maybe it would take more time if people would type it in the chat or say it out loud. But for example, we see here that the points are black and there's a slight curve to it, right? The background is gray. And you can see that the lines for the tick marks for GDP per capita and life expectancy are white. On the right-hand side, you can see like the observations, which is like a legend on the right-hand side. I think it might have cut something off too. It said, oh no, it has my question. It says, what do you see when you look at this graphic and how would you describe it? But I just wanted to take a look at that before we actually start trying to plot it. So I just wanted folks to think about that for a second. And then now let's go back to our markdown file and let's add another code chunk. Let me go back to that. If I can find my file. Okay, so I'm going to go back to our file and so add a code chunk here if you haven't already. And you can see that, let's see. Oh, I have the wrong folder, the file open. Sorry. Sorry, give me 1 moment. Okay. So if we wanted to graph that plot that we just looked at a moment ago with life expectancy and GDP per capita, we can start using the ggplot function by just typing in ggplot. So I'm going to type here ggplot. And this initial function, see, our studio is cool because it's giving me all my notes or things to how to use ggplot, right? So we use this function, and this is telling ggplot that we want to create a graph. And then whenever you use ggplot, we have to specify certain parameters. So here we're going to specify that the data we want to use, so we're going to type in data is equal to, we're going to use the gapminder data. So we'll type in equals gapminder, oops, 1R, comma. And then we also have to, with ggplot, we also have to specify something called mapping. So I'm going to type in mapping equals, and I want to take this slow because this is the first chart we're making. So the first call is the ggplot function here. And we have these data and mapping arguments, which is specifying that we're building a new plot.
And I know, just so it doesn't confuse people, even though our library is ggplot2, the actual, the function that we're using is ggplot. You don't have to have the two at when you're using the function.
Oh yes, thanks for clarifying that, Jamie. Yeah, that is really confusing because, yeah, the whole deprecated ggplot1 thing, just like ggplot no matter what it will be. Maybe it'll be ggplot3 one day. So yeah, thank you, Jamie. So yeah, you don't need the 2 here. It's just ggplot. We're specifying what data we're using, which is Gapminder. And then we're going to use this mapping equals to specify what part of that data we're using. So here we can type in, we're going to add the aesthetic function, which is shortened with AES. So we're going to type in AES here. And what we're doing now is we're telling ggplot that we want to create a chart, and the aesthetic of this chart is going to be, we're going to assign values to the X and the Y axes. So we're going to assign X equals GDP per cap, so we can get the GDP per capita on the X axis, comma, Y equals life EXP. Not plot, just that one. So I'm going to take a moment to remind everybody to save often. So I'm going to Command S or Control S. It's my favorite 2 buttons. So after you do that, you can run this chunk of code right now and see what it gives you. So you should be able to see this. And it's a chart, but we wanted to tell ggplot to give us a chart for GDP per cap on the x-axis and life expectancy on the y-axis. So here, what we did was we told it what we wanted it to look like, kind of, but we didn't tell it the geometry. So remember when we talked about the grammar of graphics? So here we talked about we told ggplot that we wanted the data, and it should be in a coordinate system that has an x and y axis. And then the last part of that is the geom, or geometry, in ggplot. So here we're going to add on the outside of this another layer, and we can type in plus geom underscore point and close the parentheses. And then you can save that and then run it again. So you should be able to see the chart that we looked at before. And it shows the GDP, or the life expectancy, in relation to GDP per capita of all the countries in the Gapminder data. Hopefully folks got that. Any questions? Okay, remember, if you don't, if you have any questions, remember to ask us. Hopefully you got that.
So there was a question, Lee, how come, so in the example that you gave, you specified the data set, you specified where the X and Y axis were, but you did not give geom point any arguments.
Yeah, so.
Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, so since we didn't add anything in geom point yet, it's the figure that we're seeing is the default that ggplot is giving us. So it's just, we're gonna also go through this in more detail later, but basically there are certain changes that you can do, for example, like the aesthetics that we specified here with X and Y. There are aesthetics, sorry, I'm gonna pause, it's really loud. Can folks still hear me? Cool. So there are certain aesthetics that you can also specify in geom point, and we're going to do that later. Unless Christian wants to add anything.
No, that's fine. I guess you can, yeah. And Lee had described it. You can think of these similar to what we had gone over last week. It's like a series of layers, and you can think of this as sort of the data flowing through these layers. I posted a link into the Etherpad that has a visual representation of that, just so it may help. It helps me to see something visually, but you can just think like we're working with the data, then we're applying a mapping, and then we're applying a way to present that visually, and the data just flows through those processes.
Yeah, and I certainly wanted to include extra time in this portion when we go through the first plots so that we can talk about it too and go through these kind of questions, because I think it's helpful to clarify. Because the syntax is really kind of confusing when you look at it. One thing that helped me make more sense of this was to consider when we create ggplot, this is kind of, or when we're using ggplot here, where I'm highlighting, it's kind of like initializing a new chart, and we're specifying the data that we want to use. And when we're doing mapping here, this is kind of where, for example, if you were using a graphical user interface software, for example, like Photoshop or another graphics software, where you're like tweaking the parameters. You'll see later that we'll be able to change how the graphics look, and you can change, for example, how big the points are and the colors. And in that way, it kind of helps me think of mapping as mapping and the aesthetic part here that we entered as kind of like the little knobs and adjustments that you can make. And then when I look at geom point here, adding the geometry is another layer of how to tell ggplot what we want it to look like. And there are different kinds of geometries too, or geoms, and we're going to look at those later too. So hopefully that makes sense for what this chart is so far. Cool. All right, so this actually brings us to our first, we're early. Are we early? We're gonna do challenges now and breakout rooms. So don't worry, it's not too challenging. It's based on what we just did. So let me look at the schedule. I think we're ahead of schedule because we're supposed to take a break. Maybe we can just do the breakout rooms and then take a break. What do y'all think, Christian, based on previous weeks?
Well, so why don't we take a short, about an hour is probably a good time for a break. So why don't we take a 10-minute break and then.
Yeah, so let's come back at like 10, 11. 10.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right on the dot.
Well, in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, 10 minutes. And so after that, we're going to go into breakout rooms and do some exercises. Okay. Remember to stretch and rest your eyes and stay hydrated.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Good job, Scott.
Feels good.
Yeah.
Whew. Hmm. Ooh. Yay! Jeez. So I was does anyone use Brew here? Homebrew?
Yes.
I've been installing our studio and couldn't install any packages and just figured out how to do it. If anyone has a problem with it, I think I have the solution. So I just was able to get ggplot and packages installed. I was having some issues on my Mac. Yay! I love when I solve a computer problem.
That's fantastic.
I was looking like Ibrahim. Oh, gosh.
So, Scott, I just missed, but what did you say that you had a way to resolve it?
Yeah, I needed to, when you install Cask, I use Homebrew to install R&R Studio, and I was running into permissions issues with being able to install packages. And the reason why is I installed R Studio through a Cask and R just through without the Cask. So I had to uninstall R, reinstall it through the Cask, and then it linked with the R Studio because they were both Cask installs.
Yeah, I haven't had good luck installing R in our studio using Homebrew.
And as a matter of fact, I'll not only kick in, but I'll amplify. I think that this has the potential to muddy the water in a big, big way. Homebrew is great, but the issues in terms of using it conventionally and then doing Cask installs have never been clear to me when I followed up in the documentation. I always go down rabbit holes and I never get out again. So you should probably take this offline, I would think.
Yeah, I'm very sorry to bring it up.
Yes,
You're
Scott.
right.
Yeah.
And don't apologize. It's a great thing to share solutions.
Yeah, but it's confusing enough. So carry on.
Hey everyone. All right, so let's all come back. And so after we looked at some ggplot, we're gonna go into some breakout rooms now. So I'm gonna assign us, let's see, we have 33 people. So
Lee, what exercises will we be doing?
oh, it's in, I don't think I put it in the Etherpad, so let me copy it. I've got a lot of windows open. All right, so I'm gonna put it into the markdown, or sorry, the Etherpad.
In the markdown document, are we looking at challenge set number 1 at line 141?
Yes, but I have it on a different, yeah, it is 141. Okay. So I'll put it in the Etherpad too. So, okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
It should be in 3, 4. Can folks see that? So our the challenges that we're going to go over in the breakout rooms are in the Etherpad line 133 and also in the markdown file that you downloaded. So you could look at that too. Moving forward, you could use the markdown file that we had folks download, since it has kind of like what we're doing in there, and then an area for you to type in the code too.
And so Lee, the one thing about that, we've discovered it won't knit because there's some missing images. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, you can use it, but then you'd have to, you need to play each code chunk and not knit the whole thing.
Okay.
We'll fix it and send it out.
Yeah, okay, well, sorry about that. We'll make those changes and send it out. But in the meantime, using our markdown file that you created at the beginning of class should be fine too. Okay, so if everyone's cool, I'll make some breakout rooms and we'll split up. Any other questions? We're a little bit ahead, so if anybody has questions.
So I think the way Lee's going to split us all into a bunch of different rooms, and then a helper will sort of be in, well, at least one helper will be in each of the rooms and kind of guide the exercises or be there and share their screen and help work through this and there to answer questions as well.
Yeah, cool. Sounds good. So I'm going to start breakout rooms now. All right, just making sure that there are helpers in each one. All right, cool.
Hello, all. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Lee, you can hear me too?
Yep, I can hear you, Dave.
Great.
I'm gonna go
So
video.
is the intent here for this to be a group exercise, or is everybody just doing their own thing independently? And if there are questions or issues, they're just going to kick them into the chat?
Yeah, so it's kind of, it was kind of flexible. Last time we did this, folks started to just work together. Initially, they started working individually, and then if they had questions, people would ask each other. And I thought, I got feedback that that was really helpful. So yeah, feel free to do what's comfortable for you. You could even just, I would say like the first couple minutes, like 10 minutes or something, you can look at the challenges and try them yourself. And then we can come back together and share what we have, or if folks are confused, you can share code even. So yeah. So this is kind of a time for you to practice on your own and
Great.
then talk to each other. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm. Yay.
So there's a question, should we align the life expectancy by country?
Is there a question in the chat? I don't see it.
Yeah.
Oh, did
so,
somebody direct
it
message?
was directed to me privately, so I'm just providing visibility to you.
Oh, okay, thanks. Let's see. I need to look at the question again, actually.
Sure. The question is, should we line the life expectancy by country?
Oh, I mean the challenge. Let me see.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, modify the example so that figure shows how life expectancy has changed over time. No, we have. We're not gonna look at that yet. So it's actually a pretty simple change. So yeah, you don't have to organize it by country. Let's see. Tim also sent out the link to the lesson, so that would be helpful too. I'll send that out to everyone.
Lee, I'm not seeing the challenge in the Etherpad anymore for some reason. This is line 145 of the Markdown file, correct?
Let's see. Can you hear me? I'm not sure if I'm muted.
Yes.
Okay. It is in. It is in. Did you say the Etherpad or your file? It should be in 140. Actually.
Okay, that makes sense. I think
there.
my Markdown's I think a few lines off, but yeah, so it's challenge set 1 in the file.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. So while folks are working on it, I'm gonna go around to some different rooms. So I'll be back. The Etherpad stops at 131. Let's see. Yeah, let's see where the challenges are. Maybe somebody pasted over it. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, let me add that. Okay, I added the challenge set to line 135 of the Etherpad again. So hopefully nobody deletes it. That's the beauty of collaborative documents, I guess, or not the downside of it. But we can also change it. So yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna go around and I'll be back.
Thanks so much.
Hey everyone, just bouncing around. So
Hi.
I'm joining different rooms just to see how it's going. So
Really?
yeah. Hey Charlotte. Yeah, in the other room they were wondering like how we should go about this, and I just said, well, last time people kind of just worked on their own thing and then started to ask each other questions and collaborated after that. So it's kind of a relaxing like time to work on your own.
I didn't realize till now that the participants can share their screens, because was it Terrence? Terrence, was your screen that you shared?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and so that's really helpful to see what different people are doing.
Lee, I think we've done the 2 challenges. I guess I'm curious if you have like suggestions of other things that we should try to play around with.
Yeah, let me see. Because we do have like a set of like added exercises for later if we have time.
Mm-hmm.
So let me think about that.
Okay, cool.
Let's see. We've tried replacing, instead of point, line, different things there, switching around by the by function, like what are we
like sorting?
Yeah, what are we sorting by, things like that. So
okay, cool. I think that was in like an upcoming challenge. Or no, it's in like an upcoming example.
Maybe what I'm going to try to do is do one where not quite sure how to do this, but to restrict it to only one continent and then look at the countries within that continent.
Yeah. You're headed in the right direction.
Okay.
And then I also encourage folks to like share what you have too. And then we can like learn from each other. Or you can share within this breakout room, and then you can also feel free to share once we all like come back together.
Okay,
cool. I'm gonna go see how other folks are doing too.
I think Lee, I think Dave George had a question about messaging to the co-host or the host. It's in Slack.
Sorry, I'm muted. I said thanks. Let me check on that.
Okay.
Can you put an if statement within ggplot? Or would it be better to basically create a new vector and then plot that vector?
Okay. I would,
depending on what you want to do, I think ggplot has more simple functions that you could use.
Okay.
Because then I think the if would kind of make it complicated.
Yeah, I would do that outside of ggplot, and then so you can view what the data set looks like, and then do the plotting. Is that does that sound reasonable, Lee?
Yeah, I think it just depends what you want to do. I think for what you said you wanted to do, like sort by country, there are ways that you can do that in ggplot.
Okay, I will.
Which I feel like Jamie has hints about.
Okay.
Well, it's something you mentioned earlier. That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let me see what's going on.
I think the question was just about how do we message outside of our individual rooms. Okay. Yeah, we're still kind of getting used to how we manage all this because we've been sort of thrown into online rather quickly. So sadly, you people are going to be our guinea pigs for some of it. Your question about where to put an if statement, generally, now this could just be the way I kind of slowly started to learn to use this, is I would get the data I wanted before I plot it, so I get it in whatever arrangements, and then I plot it. Now that could just be my personal idiosyncrasy. I'm going to ask, when we get back in the group, I'm going to also ask Christian, because I always have to tell people I am so not the statistician. So if you ask me a stat question, remember, I have an MFA in painting, so that makes me very iffy about certain things, even though I can debug code. So I'm going to check with Christian on that.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get back to that question and probably put it in the Etherpad.
Yeah, because it looks like from just some Googling,
Yeah.
it's like I could, I'm just trying to figure out, like, okay, can I do it all within ggplot? Let's say I only want to map the Americas.
Yeah.
Only want to map countries that are within the Americas on a life expectancy year.
Yeah. I guess, again, I'm going to ask Christian what he thinks. Now, I would tend to select the data I want first and then plot it. Now, that could just be my personal idiosyncrasy, but I usually, Aaliyah, you're still here. What is your take on that? Oh, I thought I saw you still here. Okay, Leah's not still here. Okay, I'm gonna, ask that to the group. But I have my own personal ideas. I adjust the data and then I plot it. Now, what do you work with normally? What kind of data?
Normally, I mean, these days I feel like I'm working with a lot of census. I work with a lot of census data, and then
Hey everyone, I'm just jumping in to see how it's going.
Oh yeah, hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Is there a helper in this room? Isn't it?
There was,
Oh.
but he will come back. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, because I was just jumping around to see. I was just trying to see like how people are doing, and in some rooms they were asking like, so how should we do this? And so last time I noticed that people were just kind of working on their own, and then eventually they started talking to each other and asking questions and sharing what they got. So I encourage you guys to talk, and unless you're already doing that because somebody's sharing screen. So
yeah, okay.
Cool, you're running the other one. Yeah.
I have one question. So this is just a, doesn't mean anything. So what if I want to see the mean for the life expectancy for each like time series? Then is there any way to do this? Well, what I think is kind of create something on the year basis and the life expectancy on the mean, assign the kind of variable and just put it here and just substitute it.
Expectancy, because GDP per capita, that value I believe is averaged already, but life expectancy, we'd have to do like some more filtering and things before we do that. I mean, feel free to try it if you want to. We probably won't have enough time to go through, get to that today, because we'll probably cover it more in the next lesson, or if we have time later, we have extra exercises, probably in the next, like in the last hour. But yeah, it's cool you're thinking about that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Was Gino the helper, or was it Ibrahim before?
I think it was Ibrahim. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Is everyone else doing okay?
I am LM George, and I'm sort of like behind, but I still find it helpful to like be listening and watching. So, like I said, I was really glad that Sungwon shared his screen, but I'm sort of like very behind. But
yeah, no worries. We've all been there. Okay, I'm glad it's helpful. What do you think is the part that's tricking you the most, or like?
Oh, all of this. This is all new to me. So all the terms, everything. Like I've never programmed before, so I don't really have a framework. So it's all new to me.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We try to make our lessons as like beginner friendly as possible. So sorry if it hasn't been the case.
No,
I'm so sorry if there are loud cars outside because I can hear. I don't know if you can. Is it too loud? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, which is why yeah, like we probably won't get to too much of like getting into too many advanced graphics today. But yeah, so yeah, I'm trying to think because we always try to make it as like inclusive and inviting as possible to beginners, because this is the point of our lessons are all for beginners. So yeah, let us know if there's, or let me know if there's anything that we can adjust or.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I do think it's helpful because, like I said, I didn't know anything about R, and now at least I'm familiar with things like looking at R Studio and now learning about R Markdown and all these things. So I do find it helpful.
Cool. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Just one question. What if this type of thing happens?
Oh yeah. Okay. So I added that in our document, thinking that we wouldn't get to it. So what's happening here is that that's the legend, because it's giving you a color for every country in the world.
True.
And so that was like a way to demonstrate what can happen. And then I forget what was after that. Can you scroll down?
Okay. It's just that's it. Because what I actually wanted to do was it was still it doesn't really say anything much about just a general trend.
Yeah. One thing you can do is change the geometry. That's something you can try. Because there are different ways that you can, or different things that you can change.
Okay. So what actually I really wanted to see is the mean of each continent. But if whenever I try to line, it doesn't show anything.
Oh yeah, this looks weird.
Yeah. So if I want to just plot the mean for the data, I have to get the mean for the time series and then plot it again, right? There is no kind of functions. There is no function for getting the mean and plotting, right?
Yeah, you'd have to do, let's see, filtering. Because the data itself is not the mean. Yeah, we would have to, we'd have to kind of do more analysis with it, or like work with the data a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, it's kind of, I mean, it might work better if you apply it to some other data that you're working with. What kind of data do you usually use?
Actually, I not really sure. I just do the little bit of everything. So.
Oh, that's okay. I was just wondering, because there are people from a lot of departments here, so some people are.
My past company, it was a big gaming company, so it was a lot about the user data.
Ooh, cool.
So what I did was getting all the kind of trimming on the Excel sheet first. And then put it on the PowerPoint and then visualize those data. So I've never used any R or even SQL because all the things were done in the Excel. So just really curious because this, I think, makes kind of productivity better because it's faster.
Yeah, I'm glad you think so. I mean, I think so too. So, but I'm just glad that this is a good like change from Excel for you. Yeah. We'll probably be able to dive into it hopefully more today, but if not, then next Friday hopefully you're available for next week's class too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I want to jump into some other groups to see how they're doing, but I'm sorry there's no helper here. Maybe I'll just move somebody over here.
It's okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. How Aubrey, can you hear me? No, just wanted to check if everyone's okay. But if you want, we can also share when we come back too.
Okay.
Like from different groups, people can share what they got. Okay. I'll
Sorry.
talk to you.
I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm doing good. Just listening and reading in on just trying to follow along, but doing good.
All right, cool. All right, good to know. All right, I'll see you all in a little bit.
Okay.
Oh, cool. Lee's back. So the question was, can you create that variable and then use it in ggplot using a piping method? And we did that. I don't know how much we covered last week, but you can do that. You can use this dplyr tool to create an average variable and then pipe that into ggplot and plot it right away. So it's a powerful method. Lee, I was just sorry, there was a question.
I got that question. Sorry.
Yeah, came up in our breakout room, so I just was sharing what we talked about.
Cool. Yeah.
We had fun in our breakout room. We shared our screens and asked questions. I think we even solved a dependency issue with something called exports.
Oh, okay. That's a common issue I'm hearing. Sorry.
I didn't know about it actually. It was like, okay.
Well, it happened to me last night for the first time, so.
Yeah.
So I was just hoping, oh, I hope this doesn't happen to anybody today. I think I'm gonna close the breakout room soon, and I think that's a good segue, Tim, because I think it'd be good to hear from the other helpers, like what everybody did in their rooms.
Cool.
For us, there was a question of how many parts of the AES function you can control for color, for example.
For color.
The challenge number 2, you can pick a variable like you can color equals continent, and it assigns some colors to each to the plot. But it was a question of whether that was inside the AES function, the aesthetic function, or if you would do plus and add it outside of it. And so we saw if you just did it inside the AES function, you could add colors to each of the continents. But if you wanted to add custom colors, you had to do it outside.
Yeah, you can create, and I think you did it. You create a defined palette that is a bunch of like colors, using the pound sign color, whatever they call that, I forget. And then you can use that in I think it's the scale, what function? You showed me the code. You should, scale color manual is a function you can add to the graph that will overwrite the color.
What was cool is, there was more continents, and the first time I tried it, it was 3 colors, and it told me you needed to have 5. So I added a couple more. I'll put in the code in the Etherpad, but I guess it's kind of how much can you use that aesthetic function. It's interesting.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Hello.
Hi there.
Welcome back.
Hey everyone, welcome back. So looks like most folks are back. Hopefully that was helpful to be able to work on the challenges on your own and then with the group as well. I was hearing a lot of interesting things that were happening or discussed in the different breakout rooms. So I thought it'd be cool if we could have the helpers just quickly talk about, or somebody from the group talk about what you all discussed, or if there were any interesting insights or questions. We had one question that came up in multiple breakout rooms, in Tim's and in the one I was in for a while. So I can start. One question was, shoot, what was the question, Tim? What question did you get?
Was it related to facet wrapping?
No, it wasn't actually. So that's cool to hear that you guys got that.
Yeah, we had some interesting questions around facet wrapping, which was cool, and also kind of grouping by country for the line graphs.
Mm-hmm.
We had a question about if it's possible to subset within ggplot. Subset your data. Yeah, so someone Googled and was kind of getting a little bit ahead, which is nice.
Yeah. Yeah, the question that came up in the group I was in and Tim's group was how to like find an average.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That came up too.
Cool. Yeah, everyone's kind of thinking in the same direction.
Were people able to do, so we were talking about average for continents and plotting those over time. Was there like an efficient way of doing that? I don't have the most efficient way of getting the mean.
Yeah, we didn't actually do that one. Well, go ahead, Tim. Did you guys do
it? So typically I would use, drawing on what we did last week, you would use dplyr and mutate and create your average variable, and then pipe that directly into ggplot and use it immediately. You don't even have to save it as. That's what I would do, but there might be a tricky way to do it inside of ggplot that I'm not aware of. So.
Yeah, that's the way that I was imagining doing it.
I'm adding
the other thing that came up in our class. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
no, go ahead.
The other thing that came up was we discovered a dependency issue with X-courts. So, and solved it. I think you have to install something. So if anybody had that.
Yeah, can you post how you solved that in the?
Yeah,
I don't know how. It was who solved it? Francisco and who had the problem where I'm missing.
Seems like a lot of Mac users are having that issue. So.
Tony and Francisco solved it. I think Tony or Francisco, if you could paste that to everyone if you haven't already. But yeah, there's a website that you can download the X-courts package.
Website was.
I don't know if it's a package. It's like I'm sorry. Go ahead, Francisco.
Oh yeah, they posted the link. Tony, I posted the link. It's a website, and you just download the package that's prompted on the screen.
Yeah, that seems like it was a common issue. So I used, I was able to fix it too, but I didn't use that website, but I'm pretty sure that's like a legit way to fix it. Were there any other questions or things that came up when you were doing the exercises?
So one question that we had in our group was, it's difficult to visualize the data without seeing an example of it. So it's difficult to say how you would construct a graph without seeing an example beforehand. So the question was, well, how do you know when to use, X versus Y, your geome point versus geome line versus something else. And for the helpers, please chime in. Mainly, it's been by example I've seen, or experience. You just see another graph and you crib it, essentially. So.
Yeah, I noticed that's kind of a hard way to think about it too when we're looking at ggplot. Because, for example, in real life, when you're working on a project, you think, okay, we want to map this data that we have, and it's like life expectancy and over the years, for example, and we want it to look this way, right? So we don't think of it in terms of the code first, so that's why it is tricky these challenges are kind of hard in that way, because it's like just asking you, I don't know, yeah, like you said, it helps to see it first or to visualize it first. How did you guys go, discuss that?
So the example where it came up in our case is when we were progressively adding pieces to our ggplot instance. And if you just leave it as is, and we changed, it's like, okay, let's just hack on this a little bit. Let's change point to a line. Mm-hmm. And if you do that without grouping things together, it looks like this zigzag thing. Mm-hmm. But if you hadn't experienced that before or recognized the problem, it would be difficult to debug that. Like, why is it doing this? And so you have to recognize, oh, okay, I want to essentially group these across the entire time series. But if you haven't encountered that problem before, it's difficult to conceive of it.
Right. Yeah, and it is really tricky when we're starting out and we don't know all the functions and everything too. Thanks for sharing that, because that'll help us try to figure out for next week and additional problems that we have. Because we had some other challenges Tim and I were thinking about doing.
So potentially, a demonstration as a leading piece into the challenge rooms would demonstrate exactly what the expected behavior was. I know that degrades the challenge somewhat, but at least it shows the larger points and it gets people on the same page, given that there could be a variety of different things that people are thinking. And then maybe they can tweak and hack internally within the groups.
Yeah, that's a good tip, Dave. Maybe we can do that for our next breakout, which is actually, I think it's a short one. So we might have time, Tim, for the extra exercises you were thinking about. But maybe we can go over the questions themselves. So let me share my screen. Okay, so can folks see that?
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so here we zoom over on the screen, and then so here the question was, modify the example that we looked at earlier, which is here, so that the figure shows how life expectancy has changed over time. So one hint that we can look at, or we can consider, is that it says change over time. So we know that we want to use some type of data or some type of element in the data that relates to time. And when we look at the data, the Gapminder data itself, there's a year column. So we can adjust our the graph that we had before. So we can create a plot using ggplot, setting the data to Gapminder. Or you can just copy and paste. I'm sure a lot of people did that. Which is the faster, easier way, or probably smarter way to do it. So you can change the aesthetics like we discussed. and assign the X and Y values. So X here, we can assign, it was GDP per capita and life expectancy initially. So if we wanted to see how it changes over time, then we'd want to see the year on the x-axis, because visually that makes sense in showing us how it changes versus on the y-axis. So x equals year, and then we can use life expectancy in the y-axis, and then add the layer, the geometry layer for geom point. I saw that some folks were playing with different geometries too, so that's really cool. I'm gonna run this here. So it shows us that over time from between 1950 and 2010, it marks the specific years that we have for each country. And it does look pretty funny, right? When we look at things over time, we don't really think about plotting dots on top of each other. So one thing you could try is to, I'm going to take this code chunk here and copy it. And then I'm going to paste it here. Another thing you could do is play with the geometry, and there are a lot of different ones. So when you type in RStudio, if you type in geom underscore, it gives you all these options of different ones. There are box plots and contours and different like 2D plots, histograms, and even like, I know you can do polygons and things like that. I don't want to jump ahead too much, but I just want to show you that those are the options. So if we did a line chart, like Christian said, you get that funky looking, yeah, what did you call it, Christian? Zigzag. Which, and I mean, there's a reason why we didn't cover this yet, because we're going to go over it later, but how to fix this. But I did want to show you what the options were. And so for the challenge 2, it was, in the previous examples in challenge, we used the aesthetic function to tell the scatter plot geom about the X and Y locations of each point. Another aesthetic property we can modify is the point color. Modify the code from the previous challenge to color the points by the continent column. What trends do you see in the data, and are they what you expected? So I'm going to add another code chunk here. Command-Alt-I, and then start a new plot. So ggplot, assign the data, specify that we're using Gapminder, start our mapping. You've probably noticed that when you use parentheses, you can use spaces or not spaces. It just depends on what you want. It's more of a like preference. So we're going to add our aesthetics here and assign X to the year, Y to and before we complete the aesthetics for this, we're going to specify color and set it to continent. So what, and it's not going to be continent colors, it's just going to be continent. So what we're doing here is telling ggplot to specify colors by each continent. And then from here, we're going to add the geometry geom point. And then run that. Oh, I have a typo. Complete. I need parentheses to close right here. And in geom point. So is this what you all got
Yes.
Cool. And then in the second challenge, I think you guys had some other questions that came from that, right? Was it you, Christian, in your group?
Well, yeah, so I think that was the final thing. But we were just playing around with this to experiment a little bit. So if you change, like Lee, like you had mentioned, we just wanted to experiment with, okay, we tried it with points, but for a time series that really doesn't look too good. So let's try it with a line chart or some of the others. So you can also choose to color by another variable. So essentially it's saying, hey, based on the continent, color this data point a certain way. You could color it based on the country or some other unique way of identifying a data point.
Okay, yeah, that's cool.
So if you change it to country, color equals country, you would see a bazillion. You know, you see one for every country.
Try that. Oh wait, I'm not sharing anymore. Oh, I deleted it. Yeah, let's try that here. I always kind of brace myself when it's loading. I'm like, what is it going to show me this time? Did it take you guys pretty long to run this too?
Yeah, I mean, it's because there's so many of them. It's like, so this is just like, you have to, I don't know, it's just a real world example of like, if you actually had to present this to somebody or in a report, you would have to think about structuring this differently or grouping things together, or think more creatively about how to present the data. It's just like, oh, okay, it's logistically impossible to view this many on the chart at one time and actually be able to interpret that coherently. So what are some other options we have? It's a little bit frustrating because there's no really right or wrong to a lot of these. It's how you're presenting the data.
Yeah, this question came up too in one of the rooms I was in about like, why are there so many points? And it's basically, we're just looking at the legend because there are so many countries. Yeah, so.
Yeah, so the graph is there. You just have to zoom, save it or zoom in. But Lee's right. We're just looking at the legend at this point. It doesn't fit in the window.
Yeah. So now that we've looked at how to create scatter plots, we can look at different ways that ggplot allows us to add new layers. So we looked at some line plots too. But there are also ways to combine the geometry, so you can actually have points and lines. So yeah, so maybe we can try experimenting with that a little bit. If there were any outstanding questions, maybe we can address them later. Or I know that while we're looking at the software, more questions are coming up too, and we're getting ideas. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my Markdown file, and you can also follow along on the file that we uploaded previously. So, so in ggplot, we saw that we could use points or a geom point for a scatter plot and lines for a line graph too. So if we edited the code chunk that we had before, I'm just going to copy this one and paste it here. And we're going to edit X to be the year. So we're going to look at it over time and life expectancy, but we're going to use another aesthetic called by. So if you go into this code chunk and add in under the aesthetic by equals, and we set it to country, And I'm going to change the color here to continent. And instead of a scatter plot, I'm going to do a line plot. So here we, for the most part, well, in general, we're using the same data. We're mapping it to X and Y, or we're mapping the X and Y data. And we're using the biaesthetic, which is kind of like, the way I think of it is kind of like categorizing or a sort of filter, and then specifying the geometry as a layer. So before we had the plot or the point layer, and now we're using the line layer. So if you run that, we should be able to chart the life expectancy for each continent, for each country, and it's colored by what its respective continent is. Hopefully folks got that. Yay or nay? Okay, cool. I'm getting some responses. Cool. Thanks. Joy has a question in the chat. Is that about, well, I'll let one of the helpers discuss that one. So another thing that we could do is layer, like I mentioned, layer line plots as well as the points on a chart. So for just to consider time, I'm gonna copy this code chunk that we just wrote and paste it here. And you can see that we're still gonna take the data from Gapminder, use the mapping or map the aesthetics, X equals year, Y equals life expectancy by country and color continent. But on top of that, we're gonna add another layer for geome point. And if you run that, you can see that we were able to overlay the points on top of the lines. And it still looks a little like, pretty messy because it's all the countries in the world. But you would still be able to see like that you can add the layers. So it's important to know that the layers line by geome line and geome point are different. And the geome line or the geome point layer is being laid on top of the geome line layer. So we can see that if I'm gonna take this code chunk again, and so we can edit some of the aesthetics in the different layers. So if you paste the previous code chunk here, we can edit the aesthetics for the line layer here. And we're gonna add a specific mapping to the line layer. So I wanna pause really quick to remind folks that the mapping that we do here with the aesthetics is applied to the entire plot as a whole. So the color specifications and the data that we're using is for what our studio or is considered in our like a global specification. So the whole chart is taking all of these characteristics. And here, when we go down and edit the geome line, I keep wanting to call them characteristics, but like if we change the details and how it looks, it will only apply to the line or the point. So here we're gonna change the mapping equals aesthetic, and we're gonna specify color equals continent. And we're gonna leave geom point the way it is. So I'm gonna leave this so to make sure folks got that. And then you can run that and see what happens. Oh, that's not what I wanted. I put color continent twice. Let me take this out. Sorry about that. So what we should have here is in the main chart, the data should be mapping X equals year, Y equals life expectancy, and by equals country. And then for geom line, that's where we're going to specify the color. So if you run that, you should see something different. So you should be able to see now that the points are black and they're overlaid on top of the line graph. And that's just to demonstrate that you can change the way that charts look and layers look on top of each other. So that's kind of, hopefully it makes sense with the way that I described it earlier. That makes more sense to me, where the parts where we're changing the aesthetics in these different layers are kind of the parts where you're tweaking or turning the knobs and adjusting the color sliders, if you will, in each layer. That's how I think of it.
So I don't know if we have time to go over this, but I'm just kind of reflecting on the fact that this data looks really cluttered, and just because there's so much on one plot, and we had a really great question come up in our session about how to separate out the different continents onto different plots. And so that's why we brought up facet wrapping. And I was wondering if we could kind of quickly go over that, since it looks like your code is pretty much ready to add the facets.
Oh yeah.
Only if we have time.
The one thing that there is a section which is on the markdown file that I sent to folks, where it's like multi-panel figures. Yeah.
We can get there later.
Did you guys look at that?
You are ahead of the game. Yeah.
I mean, I actually added the ones later on, including the code, because I wasn't sure if we'd get to it. So it looks like people are playing with it anyway. So it's good that, I mean, if you're curious, you can also jump ahead and look at that one. But yeah, so
we'll just get there when we get there.
Yeah. Let's see. Cool. So there's also a portion where, sorry, I'm going back to what we were looking at. Yeah, so I know like this is all really cluttered and like the gap finder data is really big. It's just a good example data set so that we can kind of play with different layers and adjust things. And it's not too big in the way that there are like only six variables. But it also gives us enough data to give us pretty messy charts. Okay, so I want to say that there is a challenge after this. Okay, so we added the by layer, and that lets us organize things by country.
Were you sharing your screen, Lee?
Oh, no, I'm not, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, let me. Yeah, I just have my Markdown file open, but I think there's a challenge after this. It's pretty simple though, so I don't know if we have to go into breakout rooms. So maybe we can just do that right here. I think I added it to the Etherpad. Let me edit here, challenge. So I'm adding it to the bottom of the Etherpad, so it's like one challenge. Maybe you can add another one too. So it's basically switch the order of the point and line layers from the previous example. And then what happens when you do that? Hey, Tim. Not sure if Tim's there.
Do you want to step through the exercise, Lee?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I just thought maybe you wanted to go over some. Yeah, let's do that. So I'm going to add that here. Okay, so here I'm just adding the challenge. And so if we took this, the last code chunk that we worked on right here, what if we flipped the geom line and geom point layers? So I'm going to take that and just add it here. And we can take the geom point and flip the order of them. So let's try to run that. So can folks see that?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so basically it's just, this is just to demonstrate that you can change the layers that way. So when you're creating charts and you're editing the like colors and the way that they look, so if you're editing one layer and not the other, or vice versa, then it's important to consider that you can do this and what you can and can't do. It feels like there are even more options the more you can edit. So yeah, just a simple exercise. Okay, so now that we've looked at different types of layers, there are a lot of different ways that we can change charts with different types of data, and if we're doing, for example, like statistics too. So one thing that we could do is change the scale on a chart. So for example, right now it's hard to see like the relationship between the points on the current graph, but I'm going to go back to this previous chart that we have, the initial Gapminder chart that we made. So we go here, oops, I'm just going to paste that here. For me, that one is on line like 54. So if you go there, that's around the first chart we created. And I just copied that code chunk and put it down here. So I'm going to run that again. And it takes a while, but so we can see that there are some major outliers in the right-hand side of this graph. And one thing that we can do is we can change the scale of the graph so that we can focus more on this like big cluster here and exclude the outliers. And really, of course, this always depends on what type of data you're using and what you want to show. But these are, we're just going to step through some ways that you can change the look of the chart and what you can do to focus the attention on specific parts of the data. So I'm going to take the code from the previous graph, and from here we can edit the values in geom_point. So from here, we're going to use a layer called alpha. So alpha equals, in geom_point, I'm going to type alpha equals 0.5. And what alpha does is it changes the transparency of the points or of the geometry. And in this case, it's going to be the transparency of the points. And then in addition to that, there's a function to change the scale of one of the axes. So from here, we're going to add that as a layer and call it scale _x _log 10. And if you close that and save it, you can run this. And the result should look like this. So the log10 function applied a transformation to the values before it plotted it. And so each multiple of 10 now corresponds to an increase of 1 in the new scale. So GDP per capita of 1,000 is now 3 on the x-axis. So it's kind of like zooming into this cluster on the left-hand side. And now the transparency helps too on the points, because we can now see like the density of the points as well, because you can see points underlying other points. So in addition to that, sometimes we're looking at a chart and like a scatter plot like this, and we want to see if there's some type of relationship. So one thing that ggplot lets us do is add a like a line of best fit. Some folks might remember this from statistics. And it depends on what kind of data you're working with, but you might run into this when you're working with a big data set. So the way that we would do that is, I'm going to copy this code chunk. Oh, no, I'm going to use this one because I already copied it. And I'm going to add, we have geom_point here. And I'm going to take out this alpha and just leave it as the default. And then we'll use the log 10 and add a layer called geom plus geom_smooth. And then the geom_smooth pretty much allows us to add a line here. And then the way that we do that is we add a method and set that equal to LM in quotes. And in ggplot, LM stands for linear model. So if you run that, you should be able to get a line through the clustered area that we graphed before. I actually want to see what it looks like with the transparent points, so I'm going to add the alpha back to geom_point. Alpha equals 0.5. Yeah, so you can definitely display and see more depth in the layers here. So, so far you can see that we've added, you can see that we can edit different layers in ggplot, right? So just to recap, to create a a basic chart, we need the data, we need to map the aesthetics to the coordinates, and then add the geometry, which we're doing here. In addition to the geometry, we can also edit how the geometry looks, and we made it a little bit transparent just to make it easier to read. And then we can add a line here to show, oh no, this is changing the scale of the graph. And then we can add a line to show if there's any relationship within the chart. So one more thing we could do with this Geom Smooth layer, which I'm going to add under this chart, is in addition to adding the line here, we can change the size of the line. So here I'm going to add size is equal to 1.5. And if you run that, you can see that it's slightly thicker than the previous line. What happens if we do like 2 or 3? Probably look really dense. Probably not that helpful because it covers a lot of the points, but just to demonstrate what you can do with it.
Can you put the line behind the points by just rearranging?
Let's see. Yeah, because they're different layers. So let's try it. It makes sense that it would work that way. So I took the line and I added it in front of the geom point. Let's see how that goes. Yeah. So you can add it behind.
Yeah.
It looks like all the points are like hanging on like a stick or something. Yeah, I don't know if that would be helpful for depending on whoever's, what studies you're doing, but you could do it. Good question, Jamie. Okay, were folks able to get that? I see some things in the chat, but maybe it's just.
In the chat, we were talking about getting the equation for the
for this
line.
Oh,
And what it kind of discussion has turned into is using the linear model function. It's LM is what we were saying. You can get help. You can search for help on. It's a little bit more complicated. I don't think we need to cover it now. But using the linear model function, you'll be able to get the slope and the intercept for any kind of sets of lines. It's a really powerful tool. I highly recommend taking a look at it for folks.
And just to add to that, if you look at the help for the Geom Smooth, you can see some other models you can use in addition to the LM, the linear model. So it's like, read that documentation. I couldn't find the actual formula, but I mean, I don't know, it might be help somewhere.
Yeah, that did come up when I was looking at it too. And I thought, wow, there's so many different things you could do with this. So many, it gets really complex, even just in ggplot, but then within RStudio, there are a lot of different things too. That's something I wanted to go over actually. Well, you can see on my screen right now that when you hover over like a function or some tools in GG or in RStudio, it shows kind of like a summary of what you can do with it. And then from there, sometimes, for example, what did I hover over last time? Yeah, if you just hover over it, it shows you like a kind of a preview. And then for some of them, if you press F1, oh, I don't know if you can see. I have to share my RStudio, but if you press F1, it'll show the documentation in the lower right-hand corner. So when I clicked on AES, For example, like one of these, I hovered over it and then I pressed F1 and then it opens the documentation down here. So yeah, feel free to explore all that. Another thing I found really useful was if you go to just the help menu at the top, there's our help, about our studio, documentation, yeah, a lot of different cool things, like even a markdown quick reference. So if you wanted to look back at that. Okay, so we have 2 challenges left. We might have to do like quick breakout rooms because we're gonna wrap up and we need time to do our survey too. And then there are some ways that you could export, or maybe we could jump to exporting. Maybe we could do like one challenge.
Let's do it.
Yeah, do you guys think we have time for breakout rooms? We should just do it, and I'll just pull everyone back sooner. Okay, so I'll put these in the Etherpad and put everyone in breakout rooms.
So Lee, which exercises are we doing?
I'll add them to the Etherpad or the chat. Here, I'll put
looks
them
like challenge set 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Challenge set 3. I added it to the Etherpad. It's at the bottom. Do as much as you can. It's okay if you just do the first one. So
that's on line 164.
64. Yeah, 164 of the Etherpad. Okay. All right.
And so I was using.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. Or most people.
Hello.
How'd it go?
Well.
Yeah, folks want to share?
We dipped into facet wrapping as well. That was one of the questions. So just how do you tweak that?
Cool.
We did too, and the code rendered right when we got called back. So.
Oh, do you want to share it?
We were a race against time as well. The countdown was like to 19, 18.
I know. I noticed people weren't coming back, and I thought, oh, like maybe they're in the middle of something. Does somebody want to share what you guys did then in the room? Tim,
did you want to go over facet wrapping, or did you want to? I mean, that's kind of the last thing.
I don't know if should we do the last one? We could
do the
last example.
We walked through we just highlighted what Yves was saying. It was just like, oh, okay, well, great. There's too many countries to look at this. How do we split that using facets? So,
I would show them that example, Lee, where you subset by Americas.
Yeah, okay.
You can walk through the code.
Okay, let's do that one instead of the exercise for now. Let me screen share. Oops. All right, my code chunk looks weird. Oh, there was a space before the backticks. Gotta watch out for those details. Okay, so let's go for this example that will create like multi-panel charts. So we can create multiple charts on one figure. So, so like we talked about before, Gapminder has a lot of data in it. And so one way to subset is to pretty much create a separate variable. So feel free to code along or write it here in your markdown document. I'm just going to add a code chunk here, and we'll create a new variable called Americas. And we're going to tell ggplot that, or we're going to write here that we're using the Gapminder data. Oops, Gapminder. And we're going to subset it by continent. So here we're going to add Gapminder and sort it by continent, and assigned the continent that we want, which is the Americas, which is a category in the data. And then after we create that variable, we're going to create a chart in ggplot, just like we did before. And for the data, we're going to specify that we want to use Americas. So we're using just that portion and not the entire data set. And the mapping is equal to, or we'll map the aesthetic, X equals year, Y equals life expectancy. From there, we'll add the geom layer, and we'll choose line. Just gotta close it, close the parentheses, and then add the facet wrap below that. And we're going to specify that we want this data by country. Oops. And in this example, we can also change, we can add a theme to it too. So in order to add a theme to how the chart looks, we use theme and specify axis.text.x equals element text. And we can change the angle here to 45. So what it's doing here is theme pretty much controls all of what the text on your chart looks like. So it'll control like legends, titles, and labels as well. So you can run that.
Awesome.
Mine looks ridiculous because my charts are really big. How did it turn out for folks?
Turned out good for me.
I'm trying to see what I did because mine looks kind of funny.
It's responsive. Like depending on how big your screen is. So maybe it's
maybe that's it.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Because you've got so many windows open.
Oh, okay, yeah. So when I pull it over to my smaller screen, it looks better for now. It looked good for a second. Cool. So did you all get that?
Yes.
Yay. Is that what you guys did in the breakout rooms too?
I did something different.
In general, like right now, or?
Yeah, let me, we experimented with the different colors.
Mm-hmm.
And I can share the code with you so you can open up the couple samples maybe and share with people.
Yeah. Do you want to share your screen?
Sure.
Oh, I see.
I can,
yeah.
I have the screen open.
Yeah.
Or I'll share it. Okay.
Yeah, just a couple minutes.
It's disabled.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, you have to enable it.
Oh.
That caret to the right of this share screen thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is so cool. I love this facet wrap.
Let me take Scott's code. Or, well, everybody has it. You can test it out yourself.
Well, here's 2 versions, right?
Yeah.
Hold on. I'll give the full snippet.
Oh, it adds periods in there because Zoom formats it from the chat.
Oh.
Whoa.
Did somebody make a discovery?
Oh,
nice,
yeah,
Scott.
nice, yeah.
Looks cool. I love the colors.
Yeah.
It's very avocado.
Night theme.
Yeah, it's avocado. And then we also did we moved that whole line for geo point and put it above or below geom smooth so we can change where the dots lie. And I have color palettes based on photography. Tim, so I have palettes for Vietnam, for Africa, for Botswana, for the Santa Monica Mountains, and then I can make a palette for my graphics that fit with the aesthetic that I would have for a whole brand. And with what you taught with the alpha and the color, just those little pieces gave me a way to create some beautiful graphics with ggplot. So it's pretty powerful. I'm blown away with this session, Lee. It's really great. Anyways, that's what we got to.
Thanks for sharing that, Scott.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's cool to see. I know that there's something that pops up and I think it's country codes or something like that. And it's colors for each country. I know we didn't dip into that, but it's cool that some of you did.
Oh, here's another one. Thanks, Charlotte. I'm gonna check that out. You want to run that?
This is awesome.
Yeah, can you run that, Lee? That looks interesting.
Yeah. So like Tim said, before you log off, please take our feedback survey. And that's been really helpful for us every week. And especially because every class is different too.
Oh, that looks great.
Mine's still running. Oh, here it goes. Whoa, nice.
Nice.
Cool.
Cool. I'm glad we're doing this. It's a good segue into next week because we have, Tim and I are scheming to have more plans to sharing things that you come up with.
Right on. You know, and I love in the on Markdown, I can save it all and add comments of what I was doing and experiment with the different ways of having a graphic and save it. It's really, really powerful.
Yeah, that's really cool that you did that too. I always really encourage folks in classes, and especially these classes, to like use ways that you can write down your notes and comments to yourself. So we didn't touch on it in this class, but you can add a comment in your R code to tell to leave a note for yourself. So for example, if I say add lines for each, what's it, continent. And so that note helps me, but I could also add helpful notes in the Markdown or in the code. And when I share this document with somebody I'm collaborating with, like a classmate or a PI, then they'll understand what I meant or why I did a certain, like why I did something in my code. Yeah, and then it easily translates so you can clean it up and you can publish it too. Yeah, like Scott said, for your future self. And you can remember that you can also knit this as a PDF and a Word document too.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So one thing that we didn't go over is exporting the plot, but I'm hoping we can do this next week. Or you can also run it yourself on your own. So yeah, I think that's it for this week. Please fill out our survey. Let us know how it went.
So just adding to what Lee said, yeah, fill out the survey, and that helps us all. And this is the first kind of sequence we're teaching online, so this is kind of new ground for us. So any feedback would be helpful. It really helps us, adapt to this new kind of modality. The other thing is was worried we were worried we wouldn't have enough material to cover in 3 hours, which that was kind of fanciful. So we have another hour of material, ggplot extras, that I put in the bottom of the Etherpad. So if you want to continue to learn, it's more about like removing elements. So often we overclutter our graphs with too many legends. It's kind of aesthetics about like removing and focusing your graph in a more kind of usable way. And so, yeah, that's up in the repository, provided a link to it in the bottom of the Etherpad. So.
Thank you everyone for coming, and I hope you have fun with this. I know you probably have data you can throw in and play with, so yeah, we'll see you all next week. Don't forget to do our survey. It's like 2 questions, I think. It can be as long or short as you want it to be. So so the instruction team will just be here until you run out of questions or get tired of us. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, helpers. Aw.
Good job.
Seeing clapping on Zoom is really fun. Everyone's like.
So I was fiddling with the linear model or the geom smooth. And instead of using method LM, I used method auto. I copy and paste. I'll put it in the chat again, just because it looks really cool. Also, there's another added thing that I noticed that helps me. So my syntax, like basically, I hit return after every plus sign, so that I can see all the different layers that I add like as separate lines, which makes it a little bit easier for me to read. So if you want to see that, I can share.